Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Opinion Machine, the show where we talk about all things gaming. My name is Killjoy, and today we're going to be talking about For the King 2. This is a game that recently we picked up and played, the group of people I play with, me and my friends, and I remember enjoying the first game, and the first game being a fun sort of somewhat roguelike RPG turn-based game where you have a romp through what feels like a board. You roll dice for things and random things happens, and that kind of adds to the replayability of the game, right? You pick a class, you go around the world map, you do your quests, different things happen, all that good stuff. But recently we've been playing For the King 2, which is obviously the sequel to the first game, and it becomes a 4-player game rather than a 3-player game, and that's been fun. I'm glad it's 4-player. 4-player is like the usual standard number for obviously multiplayer games, co-op games, all that. And it's been fun revisiting this sort of game. So basically what the game is you pick a class. If you're playing in single player, you pick however many people you take on your journey. In multiplayer, we're playing 4 players. So you pick a class, whether that's a herbalist or a blacksmith or a friar or a minstrel. And basically each of these classes is unique in the sense that they have they're designed to be a certain way. For example, if you play a blacksmith, that's a much more melee focused class that has the ability to repair breakable weapons, because you get weapons in the game that can break, so you have a chance to fix them and stop them from breaking, versus something like the minstrel, which uses a lute or like a banjo, these particular instruments to buff the other characters around them and also help inspire. Like, each of the classes has a unique ability. The farmer, for example, summons a scarecrow that can help defend your allies and stuff. So you pick your class, you pick your loadout, you go out into the world, and this game I think is broken into 5 or 6 chapters, and each chapter you have a story being told, and you go around the map. And essentially you roll dice for everything. You have a bunch of stats. You have like intelligence and speed and talent, all these different stats, vitality as well. And you'll roll the map, roll the dice. So, you can move 5 spaces this turn. It's all hex-based grid, and you move around and you can fight enemies, or you can go to encounters that will be like, hey, you found an abandoned church that requires this particular skill. Here's your percentages of what you can roll. Here are your outcomes, and then you can affect those rolls based on the higher the stat, or you can affect those rolls by using focus, which is a what would you call it? It's not an ability, like mana basically. I can't think of the term that I think is right now, but basically it's like mana that you can use to spend. There's a limited pool of it, and you use it to help increase your odds basically. And that's the game in a nutshell. You take it in turns. You go to these different encounters, these different events. And while you're doing that, you have almost like a timeline at the top. It changes weather that can affect what's going on, day-night cycles that can change what's going on, and it's like a countdown to chaos, which can be anything. It can be if you end up getting 5 of these things, you lose because you failed to save this person, or you might get things on there that are scourge, which will have a massive hamper on you as the players when you're walking around the map. And so you have all this going on while you're playing, and you're trying to do quests. You're trying to get through each chapter, but you're also leveling up at the same time. As you level up, you get better base stats, and that helps you improve your character. And while you fight enemies and do these encounters, you also find better gear, so you get better weapons, you get better armor. They change how your character looks. It all helps you. Everything that you do is helping to improve your party to make it easier to do the final quest, whichever chapter you're in. So the actual gameplay is fairly straightforward. Well, once you kind of got a hang for it, it's fairly straightforward. It's a decision making, a little bit of luck to the dice rolls, but overall fairly good. Now, when I was looking this up, because I couldn't remember much of what was different between the first game and the second game, because obviously this is a direct sequel. Now, not every sequel needs to be groundbreaking, but it was interesting looking up and like what's actually changed here. Obviously, there's I think a bigger world to explore. There's chapters, things like that. But rather than being a case of, I think the first game pretty much, I don't know if it played out in chapter. I think it played out in the sense that you were just always doing the same mission and you would just save it and come back to it. But this is broken down into different parts. But what's changed? What is actually different between the first game and the second game? Because I think that's actually quite a interesting look at to see just how much, like, this is a sequel through and through, in the sense that a lot of things are exactly the same from the first game. They just are. The way the game plays, what you do is identical. What's changed, however, is, let's start with I think the biggest one is that it's got 4 players instead of 3. So now that you're no longer in a party of 3 fighting however many things, you now have 4 people. And because you have 4 people, that means you can do more stuff. And it also affects combat. Now, combat has changed in a couple of ways. You now have a grid combat. In the original game, I don't believe you could move. In this, you have two rows of 4, and you can move forward and backward. And I believe if you're in the front row, you can attack with a melee. I think you can also attack with ranged at the front, but at a disadvantage or something. I think it might depend on the weapon. But you have a front row and a back row. And those tiles that you move on, they can be affected by different things. So you might have somebody with a shield who can protect the person behind them. The floor might be covered in fire, so you need to move. So you have there's like an element of moving now that's involved, and certain spells will affect certain tiles. So that's obviously a big change. Secondary actions have seemed to have been introduced, so you now can do certain things. You can heal and attack on your turn. You don't have to spend a whole turn healing up and then skipping over. You've got mercs that you can now summon and have on your team. They can fill in to make your party bigger. So that's a change. And then I believe loadouts. Now, I can't remember how it worked in the original game, but loadouts I think have been expanded upon. So you can take certain items at the beginning to start off your journey on. So that's just some stuff. I'm sure there's other changes as well, but it's just some stuff. For the King 2 is very much a game that if you really like the first one and now you want to play more of that, you now have a sequel which is more of that, more of the same sort of writing, because it's kind of tongue-in-cheek sort of writing, a bigger adventure, more encounters. You've got a bigger player pool now. Obviously, in terms of classes, I believe they're going to be different. Some of them are the same, but I believe there's different ones here. So it's like the first game, but more stuff and improved in a lot of ways, I believe. Like, I feel like when I've been playing it, I've very much enjoyed it. It feels a bit more, just everything's a bit tighter. Like, everything feels a bit better. There is one thing, though, in this game that really is quite frustrating, and that is the battle camera. And what do I mean by that is that each time you enter a battle, the camera will take a different position. And sometimes it will take a position where it's very easy to see where you are on the tiles and where the enemy is. There are some times, depending on the size of the character and the camera angle, where it's very hard to see enemies stood behind other enemies. There's times where it's very hard to see what you're clicking on. And I believe this is a really easy fix, and that is just raise the camera up a bit higher. So rather than having it like these weird sort of angles, make it isometric, or make it like just looking down on the battle a bit more, or put it behind people's heads rather than sort of behind their backsides, because it is a real problem. You're trying to play the game and click on things, and it doesn't look very good. There are just some angles in this, especially in the caves and things like that. It just feels bad having the camera set at that angle. I'd rather be able to see everything clearly all the time. I don't know why, if it's meant to be designed to be more dynamic that way, but it's definitely the biggest issue I have with the game. In terms of like gameplay and stuff, I don't really have much of an issue. But there are, minor gripes here and there, but I think the camera is definitely the biggest problem this game has. And it's when you're playing single player, it's less of a problem because obviously you're in control of everything. But it is frustrating in a multiplayer game. It's like, well, I got to try and figure out who's who and where's what. The other thing we've encountered is some sort of minor visual bugs sometimes in combat. Like, enemies will do weird things. I know they're kind of ragdolled around. And the other sort of issue is occasionally we've had a couple of syncing issues between characters. So like we've had like people being locked out and desynced and things like that, which is annoying. But that's few and far between, it seems. I believe this game came out in 2024. I could be wrong. But we've been recently playing it and it is fun. Like, I don't want to take away from the fact that this is a fun sort of hex-based RPG adventure with that roguelike element on it, in the sense that every time if you do fail something, you start again afresh, like same character, but you don't have any of the same armor. A lot of things are random. And I think the game plays fairly well, and I think the game is a very enjoyable game. And I like the fact that in co-op you can discuss through your decisions. Oh, hey, do you need this? Maybe I want this. Obviously it can lead to some quite funny hilarity of people arguing, squabbling over things. But what would co-op be without that, right? So overall, I do think it's a fun game. I do think if you liked the original game, you're going to like this. If you didn't like the original game, I don't think this is going to do anything to change your mind on enjoying For the King 2. I think 4-player might be a big selling point for some people, because like I know that a lot of people, I know the number 4 is kind of arbitrary. It's based on like older console games as well, being like 4 players, 4 controllers and all that, but that extra player slot does allow for more people to play, so you can't, that's a good thing. And even if you don't have 4 players, you can still have somebody play with 2 people, so it's all good. I've been enjoying it. I think there's sometimes smaller indie games like this they just know what they're trying to achieve, and I think this game is going for a very specific sort of board game RPG feel, and I quite like that, and I think that works really well. Just be aware that the camera is a bit shoddy, and that you might have a couple of visual bugs and some weird things happen, but nothing that is going to break the game other than the occasional desync, really. So yeah, I like it. I think other people will like this game if you haven't played the original. If you have played the original, then it's just more of the same, really, and that's great. Just improvements across the board. So, and the cool thing is with this game as well is that as you play through the game, you unlock lore that allows you to add in new classes to play as, new encounters across the field, which is awesome. And if you're playing with 4 other people or more than yourself, whoever's bought stuff in the lore store, you could all buy different stuff, but because you're in the same party, it will give you a chance to spawn all that stuff in, which is really cool, very smart, very much appreciate that. So if I haven't bought a certain amount of encounters someone else has, they will pop up in the game, regardless of who's hosting. So very, very cool, very much like that. Overall, like the game, fun little indie game. I recommend it to people. Maybe, I think it's about £20, I think £20-25, like that, which is a decent asking price. If you're the sort of person that's maybe a little bit not sure on it, wait for a sale, wait for this to be more like £10-15. I think you're going to have a fun time with it though if you've got 4 friends, and if you don't, it's still good in single player. So anyway, that'll do it for me today then, guys. Thank you so much for watching. As always, if you like the video, hit like. If you want to see more content, then hit subscribe. Links for Facebook and Twitter will be down below in the description as always, and until next video, I will see you then.